down to her last $400 and facing eviction with her 9-year-old son. Jessica Reeves made a desperate decision to buy a foreclosed ranch at a county auction that local residents deliberately avoided. What she discovered hidden beneath the property would not only change her life forever, but would uncover classified nuclear protocols that had been missing from the Pentagon for over 3 decades. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jessica Reeves stared at her bank account balance on her phone screen. $412.87. Just 14 months ago. She had been a senior cybersecurity analyst at Meridian Defense Systems with a comfortable 6-figure salary, a modern condominium in the suburbs of Phoenix, and enough savings to plan a secure future for her son, Ethan. Now at 36, she was living in a weekly rate motel that she could no longer afford, freelancing basic IT work on an unreliable basis, and counting every dollar while trying to hide her mounting panic from her son. The massive layoffs at Meridian had hit the entire division hard after the government contract fell through. But Jessica had been particularly devastated when her position was eliminated entirely. The specialized nature of her cybersecurity expertise made finding comparable work nearly impossible in the current job market, especially with her high-level security clearance having lapsed during her unemployment. Her ex-husband's child support payments had stopped completely 3 months ago, when he relocated to Singapore for a temporary overseas assignment. "You and Ethan can always come stay with us, sweetie," her mother had suggested during their weekly phone call. "The guest room is all yours, and Ethan would love being close to his grandparents." But pride and a fierce determination to maintain independence for Ethan kept Jessica from accepting that lifeline. She had rebuilt her life carefully after her divorce 4 years ago, and the thought of retreating to her parents' home felt like admitting complete defeat. She was determined to find her own solution to show Ethan that setbacks were temporary and that resilience mattered more than circumstances. As she sat at the small table in their motel room, reviewing the final eviction notice from the property manager, the reality was stark and unforgiving. They had exactly 7 days to vacate the premises. 7 days to figure out a miracle. Jessica scrolled absently through local news on her tablet, scanning job listings and affordable housing options that simply didn't exist. A small advertisement caught her eye. County foreclosure auction, properties, starting at $300. Most of the listings were for rundown houses with starting bids well beyond her means. But one property description made her pause. A foreclosed ranch 30 miles outside of Copper Canyon, Arizona, about an hour from Phoenix. The minimum bid was listed at $400 with the notation, "As is, significant damage, no inspection available." Jessica had grown up in rural Colorado, surrounded by open spaces and mountains, before her technical aptitude led her to universities and then corporate offices. She had always promised herself that someday she would give Ethan the same childhood. Experiences, room to explore, connection to the land, the lessons that came from living closer to nature. But that had been a someday dream, not a desperate last resort. She clicked on the listing photos and frowned. The ranch house was clearly in disrepair, peeling paint, broken windows, and what looked like fire damage to one section of the roof. The surrounding land appeared dry and overgrown, with several outbuildings in various states of collapse. The listing mentioned no functioning utilities, possible structural issues, property sold as is with all contents. The auction was scheduled for tomorrow morning. "What are you looking at, Mom?" Ethan asked, peering over Jessica's shoulder, his sandy hair falling forward. Jessica almost closed the browser, not wanting to share her desperate considerations with her son, but something in Ethan's curious expression stopped her. "It's a ranch," she said honestly. "A very old, very broken ranch that's being sold tomorrow." Ethan's eyes widened. "Like with horses and a barn and everything? Well, there aren't any horses now, Jessica explained. Someone lost the ranch to the bank, and now it's being sold again. It needs a lot of work. Could we buy it? Ethan asked with the straightforward logic of a 9-year-old. You always said you wanted us to have more space someday. Jessica started to explain all the reasons why they couldn't, the repairs, the distance from town, the impracticality of it all, but stopped herself. What were their alternatives? Another overpriced rental that would drain what little remained of her savings? Moving back to her parents' house and admitting defeat? That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Jessica researched everything she could about the property. It was known locally as the Harmon Ranch, named after the family that had owned it, from the 1950s until the early 1990s. For the past 12 years, it had belonged to a retired Air Force colonel named Victor Sullivan, who had died without heirs. The previous year, the property taxes had gone unpaid and the county had foreclosed. The more Jessica read, the more her professional curiosity was piqued. Colonel Sullivan had been a mysterious figure in the local community, brilliant but reclusive, known for his paranoia and strange habits. He had retired from service abruptly in the early 1990s and purchased the remote ranch shortly afterward, rarely venturing into town except for essential supplies. By morning, Jessica had made her decision. It was risky, possibly foolish, but it also felt like the only path forward that didn't involve retreat. She withdrew $400 from her account, nearly everything she had, and drove to the county courthouse. Ethan buckled into the back seat with a backpack full of books, snacks, and his treasured collection of model airplanes, preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Are we really going to buy a ranch today? Ethan asked, his voice caught between excitement and uncertainty. We're going to try, Jessica answered honestly. But it's a long shot, sweetheart. Other people might want it too. At the courthouse, Jessica registered as a bidder and received a numbered paddle. Ethan sat beside her in the back row of the auction room, unusually quiet as he sensed the importance of the moment. The auctioneer worked through several properties before reaching the Harmon Ranch. When the listing appeared on the projection screen, Jessica felt her heart race. This was it, their one desperate chance. Next we have the Harmon property, 28 acres with ranch house and outbuildings. Significant damage noted. Property sold as is. Opening bid at $400. Do I hear $400? Jessica raised her paddle, her hand trembling slightly. The auctioneer nodded. $400 from bidder 27. Do I hear $500? The room remained silent. Jessica scanned the faces around her, expecting competition but finding only disinterest or even faint expressions of pity, going once for $400. From the corner of her eye, Jessica noticed an older man in a dark suit studying her with unusual intensity. For a moment, she thought he might bid, but he remained still, going twice for $400. Ethan squeezed her hand, not fully understanding what was happening but sensing its significance. Sold to bidder 27 for $400. A wave of emotions crashed over Jessica: relief, terror, disbelief. She had just spent nearly every dollar she had on a dilapidated property she'd never even visited. As she completed the paperwork and handed over the cashier's check, the clerk gave her a curious look. The Harmon place, huh? The woman lowered her voice. You should know there's a reason nobody wanted that property. Because of the condition? Jessica asked. The clerk shook her head. That's part of it, sure. But that place has history. Strange history. Old Colonel Sullivan spent nearly 3 decades there, hardly leaving. They say he was building something out there, something the government was interested in. The clerk leaned closer. Some folks say it's not just the house that's broken. The land itself feels wrong. Jessica's analytical mind immediately began categorizing the layers of superstition and local rumors that often attach themselves to remote properties. As a cybersecurity specialist, she found such folklore intriguing rather than frightening. "I don't believe in curses," she said with a small smile. "Just opportunities for problem solving." The clerk shrugged. "Your funeral. Keys are in the envelope along with the property maps and deed." As they drove the hour to their new property, Ethan's excitement grew. "Will we sleep there tonight, Mom, like camping?" The thought hadn't occurred to Jessica. Their motel room was paid through tomorrow, but financially, it would make sense to move immediately, even into a house without functioning utilities. "Maybe," she hedged. "We'll need to see what condition it's in first." When they turned onto the long dirt driveway, reality struck hard. The ranch house looked even more dilapidated in person than it had in the photos. A single-story southwestern-style structure with stucco walls crumbling in places, several broken windows, and a section of roof that had clearly suffered fire damage. The surrounding land was dry and overgrown with desert scrub, and the outbuildings, a barn, what looked like a workshop, and several smaller structures were in various states of disrepair. "It's perfect," Ethan declared, unbuckling his seatbelt before Jessica had fully stopped the car. "Ethan, wait!" Jessica called, but her son was already running toward the house, propelled by the boundless optimism of childhood. Jessica followed, more cautiously, mentally cataloging the most urgent repairs. The roof damage was concerning, but appeared limited to one section of the house. The foundation seemed solid, though the porch steps had partially collapsed. The front door was secured with a padlock, which Jessica opened with the key from her paperwork. "Ready?" she asked Ethan, who nodded eagerly. The door creaked open, on rusted hinges, revealing a dust-filled entrance hall. The air inside was stale and dry, with an underlying mustiness that suggested water damage at some point. Jessica stepped cautiously onto the tile flooring, testing each section before committing. Her weight. "Hello," Ethan called out, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. "We're your new family." Despite her concerns, Jessica smiled at her son's immediate claim on the space. They moved slowly through the first floor, a living room with a stone fireplace, a dining area, a kitchen with appliances that had to be at least 30 years old, and two small bedrooms with closets. A hallway led to a bathroom with an old-fashioned tub and what appeared to be the master bedroom at the back of the house. Throughout the house, Jessica noted that beneath the layers of dust and neglect, the structure itself was fairly solid. The fire damage was contained to what had been a small office or den, with the roof partially open to the elements, but the structural beams still intact. The ranch house had good bones, as her father would say. The kitchen cabinets contained a few canned goods and basic supplies, long expired, but suggesting that Colonel Sullivan had departed suddenly or hadn't planned for his absence to be permanent. A calendar on the wall was frozen in time, October 1992, with several dates circled in red marker. "Can this be my room?" Ethan asked, standing in a small bedroom with faded blue wallpaper and built-in bookshelves. "If that's the one you want." Jessica agreed, relieved that at least the ceiling appeared solid with no obvious water damage. They explored the rest of the property, finding the outbuildings mostly empty, except for basic tools and equipment. The barn contained an old pickup truck, its tires flat and engine probably long dead, but otherwise intact. The workshop was padlocked with a different key than the one they had been given. "We'll need to find a way into that later," Jessica noted, making a mental inventory of their most pressing needs: water, electricity, and secure shelter. As they circled back to the house, Jessica's attention was drawn to a concrete structure partially buried in the hillside behind the ranch house. Unlike the other buildings, this one appeared to be relatively new and in good condition, a bunker-like entrance with a heavy metal door. "What's that?" Ethan asked, already heading toward it. "Careful," Jessica cautioned, following close behind. It looks like some kind of storm shelter or storage cellar. The door was secured with another padlock, different from those on the house or workshop. None of the keys in Jessica's envelope seemed to match it. "We'll figure that out later too," she said, making a note to purchase bolt cutters on their next trip to town. "Let's see about making one room livable for tonight." They returned to the house, and Jessica checked her phone. No service, as expected given their remote location. Another challenge to solve, but one problem at a time. First, shelter and water. By late afternoon, they had cleaned one bedroom enough to make it habitable and found a working hand pump in the yard that produced cold but clear water when operated with enough effort. A thorough search of the kitchen uncovered some camping supplies, a propane stove with a half-full tank, some basic cookware, and several gallons of water in plastic containers that Jessica decided to use only for washing until she could test the well water. "What do you think, Ethan?" Jessica asked as they sat on the front porch eating sandwiches they'd brought from town. "Should we stay tonight or go back to the motel one more time?" Ethan looked around at the vast open space surrounding their new home, at the mountains in the distance turning purple in the evening light, at the hawk circling lazily overhead. "I want to stay," he said firmly. "This is our ranch now. We should be here." Jessica nodded, feeling an unexpected sense of rightness in her son's decision. Despite the property's obvious challenges, there was something compelling about it, a sense of possibility she hadn't felt in months. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert landscape, Jessica noticed a vehicle approaching on the distant road. It slowed as it passed their driveway, then continued on. Probably just a curious neighbor, she thought, but made a mental note to prioritize security measures. Their remote location was both an advantage and a vulnerability. After Ethan had fallen asleep, wrapped in his sleeping bag on the bedroom floor with his backpack as a pillow, Jessica sat on the front porch with a notepad making lists by flashlight. The enormity of what she had done hit her in waves. She had spent nearly every dollar she had on a property that most people considered worthless. She had brought her 9-year-old son to live in a house with no functioning utilities. She had traded the little security they had for a massive project with no guarantee of success. "What have I done?" she whispered to the night air. As if in answer, the desert came alive around her, the rustle of small creatures in the brush, the distant call of a coyote, the vast canopy of stars overhead so much clearer here than in the city. Jessica looked up at the star-filled sky, so much more visible here than in Phoenix, and felt a strange certainty settle over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever secrets this old ranch held, she and Ethan were exactly where they were meant to be. The next morning, Jessica woke to sunlight streaming through the curtainless windows and the sound of Ethan already up and exploring. "Mom, come quick, I found something cool in the kitchen." Jessica hurried to join her son, who was pointing excitedly at what appeared to be a normal section of tile flooring near the pantry. "Look, it moves," Ethan demonstrated by pressing on one edge of a floor tile, causing the opposite end to rise slightly. Jessica knelt to examine it more closely. It wasn't damage or deterioration. The tile was intentionally installed as a small hidden compartment. She carefully pried it open to reveal a space about the size of a shoebox beneath the floor. Inside was a key not old like the ones they'd been given with the property, but modern, made of polished steel with a digital chip embedded in the head, like a high-security access key. "Treasure!" Ethan exclaimed. "I knew we'd find treasure in our ranch." Jessica turned the key over in her hand, her cybersecurity training immediately recognizing it as military grade, the kind used for secure facilities with classified access. The alphanumeric code etched into its side was unlike any civilian key system she had encountered in her work. "What does it open?" Ethan asked, excitement dancing in his eyes. "I'm not sure," Jessica replied, though her mind immediately went to the concrete bunker behind the house. But I think we should be careful with it. They spent the morning exploring the property more thoroughly in daylight. Beyond the main structures they'd seen the previous day, they discovered a small concrete pad that might have once held a satellite dish, a water tank on the hillside that could potentially be restored, and the remains of what appeared to be a helipad, flat, circular, and cleared of vegetation even after years of neglect. By midday, practical concerns took precedence over mystery. Jessica drove them back to town to gather their few possessions from the motel, purchase basic supplies, and look into utility connections. At the local hardware store, she struck up a conversation with the owner, an older man named Frank Delgado, whose family had owned the shop for generations. The Harmon Ranch, huh? Frank's eyebrows rose when Jessica mentioned her purchase. Brave woman, that property's been sitting empty since Colonel Sullivan passed. Before that, it was abandoned for nearly a decade after the last Harmon died. I know it needs work, Jessica acknowledged, but the price was right, and it's a chance for a fresh start for my son and me. Frank studied her for a moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. Tell you what, I've got some solar panels and a basic battery system in the back from a job that fell through. Previous customer already paid, then changed plans and went with grid power. You can have them at cost if they'd help you get that place livable. The unexpected kindness brought tears to Jessica's eyes. That would help tremendously. Thank you. Been in this town my whole life, Frank said, waving off her gratitude. The Harmon place was good land before all the strange business with the colonel. Would be good to see it come back to life. He hesitated, then added, you might want to talk to Marianne Cooper at the library. She and Colonel Sullivan had some kind of friendship years ago. If anyone knows what he was really doing out there, it's Marianne. Jessica made a mental note to visit the library, both for information about the ranch and to inquire about internet access options. Perhaps there might eventually be remote work opportunities related to her cybersecurity background once they had reliable connectivity. By evening, they had arranged for a utility assessment the following day, purchased enough supplies to make the house minimally functional, and loaded their car with the remainder of their possessions from the motel. They returned to the ranch. As the sun was setting, casting an amber glow across the desert landscape, as Jessica unloaded their supplies, she noticed a black SUV parked on the road at the edge of the property line. A man in a dark suit stood beside it, watching them through binoculars. After a moment's hesitation, Jessica approached, protective instincts on alert. Can I help you? She called when she was within speaking distance. The man lowered the binoculars. He was in his 50s, with close-cropped gray hair and the rigid posture of someone with military training. Name's Donovan, he said without offering a hand to shake. Department of Energy. Jessica immediately recognized the cover designation often used by certain government agencies. Her years in defense contracting had taught her to recognize the subtle signs of someone not being entirely forthcoming about their affiliation. Jessica Reeves, she replied. My son and I just bought this property yesterday. Figured as much. Donovan's eyes scanned the ranch house and outbuildings with practiced efficiency. Planning to stay long? That's the idea, Jessica said, measuring her words carefully. Is there something I should know about this property, Mr. Donovan? The man's expression revealed nothing. Just standard monitoring of former government employees' residences. Colonel Sullivan worked on some sensitive projects. Protocol requires periodic checks of his known locations. It was a plausible explanation, but Jessica's instincts, honed by years of security work, told her there was more to the story. Well, now it's my residence, and I'd appreciate advance notice of any future periodic checks. Donovan nodded. Slightly. Of course, Ms. Reeves. Have you found anything unusual on the property? Papers, storage devices, equipment? The key hidden beneath the kitchen floor seemed to burn in Jessica's pocket, but she maintained a neutral expression. Just dust and spider web so far. If I find the Colonel's stamp collection, should I call the Department of Energy? The slight narrowing of Donovan's eyes told Jessica her sarcasm had hit a nerve. Here's my card. If you find anything that seems military in nature, I'd appreciate a call. As Donovan turned to leave, he paused. One more thing, there's been some unauthorized activity around this property over the years. People interested in the Colonel's work. I wouldn't go exploring any structures beyond the main house until we've had a chance to verify they're safe. Especially not with a child around. With that cryptic warning, he climbed into the SUV and drove away, leaving Jessica with more questions than answers about their new home. That night, after another makeshift dinner and getting Ethan settled to sleep, Jessica's curiosity drew her back to the concrete bunker behind the house. With a better flashlight purchased in town and the bolt cutter she'd bought from Frank's hardware store, she approached the heavy metal door. The padlock was serious business-hardened steel with a shrouded shackle that made it resistant to cutting. After several minutes of struggle, Jessica managed to break it open, the lock falling to the ground with a heavy thud. The door itself was even more formidable steel-reinforced concrete with an electronic keypad beside it. The keypad appeared dead, its display dark, but Jessica noticed something else. A small recessed panel beneath it with what looked like a key slot. Heart pounding, Jessica took out the steel key they'd found under the kitchen floor. It fit perfectly into the slot. She hesitated, suddenly aware of the silence pressing around her in the dark desert night. Donovan's warning echoed in her mind. Was this what he had been concerned about? But her professional curiosity won out. Slowly she turned the key. A soft hum emanated from the door as dormant systems powered up. The keypad display flickered to life, glowing green in the darkness, displaying a single message: authorization accepted. Welcome back, Colonel Sullivan. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a dimly lit concrete stairwell descending into darkness. Emergency lights flickered to life along the walls as Jessica took her first, tentative steps inside. The air smelled stale but not unpleasant surprisingly. Clean and regulated compared to the abandoned ranch house above. The stairwell extended about 20 feet down before opening into a corridor lined with polished metal panels. Jessica moved cautiously, her security training kicking in as she scanned for cameras or motion sensors. The facility appeared to be running on backup power, with only essential systems operational. At the end of the corridor stood another door, this one more sophisticated than the entrance, with both a keypad and a biometric scanner. For a moment, Jessica considered turning back. Whatever Colonel Sullivan had built here was clearly designed to remain hidden, and Donovan's warning now seemed more ominous than bureaucratic. But the analytical part of her mind that had made her an excellent security analyst pushed her forward. If there was something dangerous here, she needed to know for Ethan's safety. The keypad beside this inner door was active, awaiting input. Without a code, Jessica expected to be locked out. But when she examined the biometric scanner more closely, she noticed something unusual, a small note taped to its side, yellowed, with age but clearly preserved in the controlled environment. In precise handwriting, it read, Contingency Access, October 17th, 62. A birth date? An anniversary? Jessica tried the numbers on the keypad. To her surprise, the door unlocked with a series of metallic clicks. Authorization granted. Secondary protocol engaged, announced a computerized voice as the door swung open. Jessica gasped at what lay beyond. The room was massive, at least 3,000 square feet of underground space, filled with computer equipment, workstations, and what appeared to be a sophisticated communications center. The technology was a strange mix of eras, some equipment clearly from the early 1990s when Sullivan had first acquired the property, while other systems looked more advanced, as if they had been upgraded over time. Most surprising was that everything appeared to be functional, running on what must be an independent power source. Soft lights illuminated the space, and cooling fans hummed quietly, keeping the equipment at optimal temperature. "What were you working on, Colonel?" Jessica whispered to the empty room. As if in response, a large central monitor flickered to life, displaying a simple prompt: voice authentication recognized. Access level, guest, limited functionality available. The system had somehow registered her voice and granted restricted access. Jessica approached the central workstation, where multiple screens displayed various data feeds, some showing what appeared to be security camera footage of the ranch perimeter, others scrolling through lines of code or displaying complex schematics. On the main desk sat a leather-bound journal, carefully positioned as if left intentionally for whoever found this place. Jessica opened it, recognizing the same precise handwriting from the note at the scanner. "If you're reading this, I am gone, and you have found what I have worked to protect for nearly 3 decades, the journal began. "My name is Colonel Victor Sullivan, former Director of Special Projects at the Defense Nuclear Agency. What you have discovered is not merely a bunker, but a secure fallback facility designed to preserve critical protocols in the event of catastrophic system failure at the Pentagon." Jessica's heart raced as she continued reading. The journal detailed how in 1992, Sullivan had been tasked with developing contingency measures following a near miss in the nuclear command and control systems. During that process, he discovered critical vulnerabilities that could potentially be exploited, flaws in the authentication protocols that might allow unauthorized nuclear launch commands to be processed if certain systems were compromised. "I presented my findings to my superiors," Sullivan had written, "only to discover that certain elements within our government preferred these vulnerabilities remain in place, backdoors that could be utilized in circumstances deemed necessary by those not in the official chain of command." Sullivan described how he had secretly developed corrected protocols and secure authentication measures, creating backup systems that would prevent any unauthorized access to nuclear launch capabilities. When he realized his work was being monitored and would likely be confiscated, he made the decision to take the only copy of the corrected protocols and disappear. "I did not defect or betray my country," he insisted in his neat handwriting. "I acted to protect it from those who would circumvent the safeguards put in place to prevent nuclear catastrophe. The protocols contained in this facility are the only existing copies of the correct authentication procedures, the ones without the deliberate vulnerabilities." Jessica sat back in the chair, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. If Sullivan's account was accurate, she had stumbled upon classified nuclear protocols that had been missing from Pentagon records for over 30 years, materials that both legitimate government agencies and potentially other interests would be desperate to recover. The final pages of the journal took a more personal turn. "I have lived in isolation for decades, periodically updating these systems and monitoring attempts to locate me. My cancer diagnosis makes it clear I will not be able to continue this vigil much longer. Rather than destroy this facility, I have decided to leave it intact, protected but discoverable by someone with the right combination of skill, need, and perhaps destiny. If you are reading this, you are that person." The entry concluded with specific instructions. "Trust no one who claims government authority without multiple verifications. The individuals who wanted these backdoors preserved are patient and have likely maintained their influence. The protocols must eventually be returned to legitimate authorities, but only under circumstances that ensure they will be implemented rather than buried again." Jessica closed the journal, her mind racing with the implications. She was now in possession of highly classified materials that multiple parties might kill to obtain or to keep hidden. And she had a 9-year-old son sleeping peacefully in a run-down ranch house above, unaware that their new home had just become potentially the most dangerous place for them to be. A noise from one of the security monitors caught her attention. Headlights approaching on the distant road leading to the ranch. Jessica quickly gathered the journal and scanned the bunker for anything else immediately useful. On a shelf near the workstation, she found a satellite phone, a small hard drive labeled Primary Protocols, encrypted, and what appeared to be a government-issue handgun in a lockbox. She took the phone and hard drive but left the weapon. She had never been comfortable with guns, and introducing one into a house with a curious 9-year-old seemed more dangerous than protective. Before leaving, Jessica noticed a control panel labeled Security Systems. One switch was marked Perimeter Alert Disabled. She flipped it to Enabled and was rewarded with a series of green lights illuminating on the panel. Jessica carefully retraced her steps, securing each door behind her. By the time she emerged from the bunker, the vehicle she had spotted on the monitor was turning into their driveway, the same black SUV from earlier. Donovan had returned, and at nearly midnight, his visit was unlikely to be a casual follow-up. Moving quickly but quietly, Jessica slipped back into the house through the rear door and checked on Ethan, who was still soundly asleep. She hid the journal, hard drive, and satellite phone in her backpack, then took a deep breath and went to answer the insistent knocking at the front door. Donovan stood on the porch, flanked by another man in similar dark clothing. Both had the alert, tense posture of agents expecting trouble. "Ms. Reeves," Donovan said without preamble, "we need to inspect the property immediately. We have reason to believe there may be hazardous materials left by the previous owner." "At midnight?" Jessica challenged, blocking the doorway. "I think not. My son is sleeping, and you have no legal right to enter our home without a warrant." Donovan's expression hardened. "This isn't a standard situation, Ms. Reeves. Colonel Sullivan was involved with classified research. Certain protocols require immediate action when his monitoring systems are activated." The implication was clear. They knew she had entered the bunker. The security system she had enabled must have sent an alert to whatever agency Donovan actually represented. "I'll be happy to discuss this in the morning," Jessica insisted, her voice calm despite her racing heart. "With proper documentation and during reasonable hours. Until then, I must ask you to leave my property." The second agent stepped forward, his hand moving subtly toward his jacket, but Donovan stopped him with a slight gesture. "We'll return at 8 a.m., Donovan said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "I strongly advise you not to explore any more of the Colonel's renovations before then. For your safety and your son's." As they turned to leave, Donovan added, "And Ms. Reeves? If you've found anything unusual, bringing it to our attention immediately would be in everyone's best interest." Jessica watched them drive away, her security training screaming that they wouldn't simply wait until morning. Whatever she had stumbled upon, it was significant enough that Donovan would likely call for backup and possibly surveillance overnight. She needed help, but who could she trust? Her former security clearance had taught her that standard law enforcement would defer to federal agencies in matters like this. Her former colleagues at Meridian Defense might have contacts who could verify Donovan's credentials, but reaching out to them might also alert others to her discovery. The satellite phone from the bunker offered a potential solution. If Sullivan had been as thorough as his journal suggested, he might have programmed trusted contacts into it, people who could help navigate this situation. Jessica retrieved the phone from her backpack and powered it on. The device activated without requiring a password, displaying a simple interface with only 3 contacts saved labeled only as Contingency 1, Contingency 2, and Verification. Jessica selected the third option, reasoning that before reaching out for help, she should confirm whether Sullivan's concerns were legitimate or the paranoid delusions of an isolated man. The call connected after several rings, and a cautious female voice answered. Authentication point. "Please provide identifier." Jessica hesitated, then remembered the code from the inner door. October 17th, 62. A pause then. Identity not recognized. But contingency code accepted. Please state the nature of your inquiry. I found Victor Sullivan's facility, Jessica said carefully. I need to verify whether his concerns were justified. Another pause, longer this time. Understood. Verification protocol initiated. Your location has been traced via this connection. If your situation is genuine, expect contact within 3 hours. Maintain position and avoid further communication with other parties. The call ended abruptly, leaving Jessica with more questions than answers. Had she just made a terrible mistake? Or had she reached legitimate allies who could help untangle the dangerous situation she found herself in? With no way to know for certain, Jessica focused on what she could control. She quickly packed essential items for herself and Ethan: clothes, food, the important documents from her backpack, and the materials from Sullivan's bunker. If they needed to leave quickly, they would be ready. Next, she implemented basic security measures, checking all windows and doors, positioning furniture to create noise if anyone tried to enter silently, and setting up her phone to record any activity near the house. Her years in cybersecurity had included some physical security training, and she applied those principles as best she could with limited resources. Finally, Jessica reviewed the journal more thoroughly, looking for any information that might help them navigate the immediate threat. Sullivan had included a section titled Verification Protocols, with instructions for confirming the legitimacy of any government representatives. True Defense Nuclear Agency personnel will carry credentials, with a specific holographic marker in the lower right corner, a small pentagon within a circle. Additionally, legitimate agents will be able to provide a daily verification code when asked for today's contingency identifier. If they cannot provide this, they are either imposters or operating outside official channels. Armed with this information, Jessica felt marginally more prepared to face Donovan in the morning, assuming the contact promised by the verification call arrived first. As she completed her preparations, Jessica checked on Ethan again, watching his peaceful sleep with a mixture of love and worry. Just days ago, her biggest concern had been finding affordable housing. Now she was potentially at the center of a decades-old government conspiracy involving nuclear launch protocols. "I'm going to keep you safe," she whispered to her sleeping son, "whatever it takes." Around 2:30 a.m., Jessica's alertness was rewarded by the sound of tires on gravel, not approaching the house directly, but stopping some distance away on the access road. She moved cautiously to the window and observed a vehicle with its lights off parked at the edge of the property. A single figure emerged and began moving toward the house, taking a careful route that suggested they were avoiding potential surveillance. Jessica positioned herself near the front door, the satellite phone in one hand and a heavy flashlight in the other. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. The soft knock, when it came, was barely audible. "Ms. Reeves?" A woman's voice called quietly. "I'm here regarding the verification call. I'm alone and unarmed." Jessica opened the door a crack, chain still engaged. The woman outside appeared to be in her 60s, with silver hair and the crisp bearing of someone with military background, despite her civilian clothes. "Show me your credentials," Jessica demanded. The woman held up an ID card. "Admiral Margaret Chun, retired. I was Naval Intelligence Liaison to the Defense Nuclear Agency during Sullivan's tenure." Jessica examined the ID carefully. "How do I know you're really here to help?" "Because I'm the one who helped Victor disappear in '92, Admiral Chun replied. "He found vulnerabilities that certain parties wanted to exploit, backdoors into the nuclear launch authentication system. When he refused to cooperate, he became a liability." The journal mentioned contingency identifiers as verification, Jessica pressed. Admiral Chun nodded approvingly. "Today's identifier is Broken Arrow Sunrise." Vic designed the system to generate new codes daily based on a complex algorithm. Only legitimate DNR personnel would have access to them. This matched what Sullivan had written. Jessica removed the chain and allowed the woman to enter. "We don't have much time," Admiral Chun said once inside. "Donovan works for a private intelligence firm with deep government connections. Same people who wanted Sullivan's findings buried 30 years ago. They've been searching for this place since Vic disappeared. Why not just raid the property after Sullivan died?" Jessica asked. They didn't know exactly what he had built or where. Sullivan was clever. The property records show a simple ranch house with no indications of the bunker. They've been monitoring but couldn't justify a full search without raising questions. Your purchase and subsequent activation of the systems forced their hand. Admiral Chun glanced toward the room where Ethan slept. "You have a child?" Jessica nodded. "My son, Ethan. He's 9. That complicates things," the Admiral said grimly. "They won't hesitate to use him as leverage." Fear and determination crystallized into resolve in Jessica's mind. "What do we do?" "We get you and your son to safety, then secure the protocols," Admiral Chun said decisively. "I have a team of trusted former colleagues standing by, but we need to move before Donovan returns with reinforcements." "How do I know I can trust you?" Jessica asked, the security analyst in her still cautious. Admiral Chun met her gaze directly. "You don't. But consider this. If I wanted those protocols for nefarious purposes, I would have brought a team and taken them by force. Instead, I'm here alone, asking for your cooperation." It wasn't perfect assurance, but it was the best available option. Jessica nodded. "I'll wake Ethan." Within 20 minutes, they were packed and ready. Jessica had retrieved the hard drive and journal from their hiding place, and Admiral Chun had done a quick sweep of the house to ensure they weren't leaving anything critical behind. "What about the bunker itself?" Jessica asked as they prepared. "To leave, my team will secure it properly once we're gone," the Admiral replied. "The facility contains more than just the protocols. It has evidence of who was involved in the attempt to create nuclear launch backdoors. That evidence is just as important as the protocols themselves." As they stepped outside, the pre-dawn desert was silent and still. Admiral Chun's vehicle, an unmarked SUV with government plates, waited at the edge of the property. "Stay close and move quickly," she instructed. "My associate is watching the access road, but Donovan could return at any time." Ethan, still groggy from being awakened so early, held Jessica's hand tightly. "Mom, what's happening? Why are we leaving?" Jessica knelt to her son's level. "Remember how we talked about adventures sometimes being unexpected? This is one of those times. We need to go with Admiral Chun for a little while, until some things get sorted out." Ethan studied the older woman with a child's directness. "Ah, you one of the good guys?" Admiral Chun's stern expression softened slightly. "I've spent my life trying to be, young man." This simple answer seemed to satisfy Ethan, who nodded solemnly. "Okay, but we're coming back to our ranch, right? I didn't even get to explore the barn yet." "We'll do everything possible to make that happen," Admiral Chun promised, meeting Jessica's eyes over Ethan's head with a look that acknowledged the uncertainty of that promise. As they approached the vehicle, a flash of headlights on the main road caught Jessica's attention. "Someone's coming," she warned. Admiral Chun quickened their pace. Into the vehicle now. They had just reached the SUV when the approaching vehicle turned onto their access road, high beams illuminating them clearly. It was Donovan's black SUV, and it was moving fast. "Get in and stay down," Admiral Chun ordered, opening the rear door for Jessica and Ethan before sliding into the driver's seat. A man Jessica hadn't noticed before sat in the passenger seat, already speaking rapidly into a secure radio. "Hostiles approaching. Protocol Omega in effect. I repeat, Protocol Omega." As soon as their doors closed, Admiral Chun accelerated down a barely visible track leading away from the main drive, her driving expert and controlled despite the rough terrain. Behind them, Donovan's vehicle skidded to a stop at the ranch house. Multiple figures emerging with flashlights and what appeared to be weapons drawn. "They're searching the house first," the man in the passenger seat reported. "That gives us about 3 minutes before they realize we've gone off-road." Jessica held Ethan close, trying to shield him from seeing the armed men at their home. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Secure facility about 2 hours from here," Admiral Chun answered, her attention on navigating the difficult terrain in the pre-dawn light. "Off the grid, untraceable. We'll regroup there and determine next steps." As they bounced along the rough desert track, Jessica looked back at the ranch house, their home for barely 48 hours, now swarming with unknown operatives. The bunker, the protocols, the entire situation seemed surreal compared to her desperate financial straits just days earlier. "I'm sorry I got us into this, Ethan," she whispered to her son. Ethan, remarkably calm given the circumstances, looked up at her with trust in his eyes. "You didn't do anything wrong, Mom. We found a mystery, that's all. And mysteries are supposed to be solved." His simple confidence steadied her. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The SUV crested a ridge just as the sun began to rise over the desert mountains, bathing everything in golden light. Behind them, in the distance, Jessica could see vehicles beginning to fan out from the ranch house in search patterns. "Don't worry," Admiral Chun said, noting Jessica's backward glance. "We'll be long gone before they figure out which way we went. And by tonight, we'll have enough evidence secured to bring this whole operation into the light." As they drove into the rising sun, Jessica held the hard drive containing Sullivan's nuclear protocols close. She had wanted a fresh start, a new beginning for herself and Ethan. She had found that, and more, a purpose greater than herself, a mystery 3 decades in the making, and perhaps the chance to protect her nation from vulnerabilities hidden in its most critical security systems. The ranch had cost her last $400, but what she'd discovered there was truly priceless, a chance to make a difference that went far beyond her personal struggles. As Admiral Chun had said, by nightfall, they would have the evidence needed to expose those who had tried to create secret backdoors into nuclear launch systems. The truth, hidden for decades, would finally come to light. Jessica looked down at Ethan, now drifting back to sleep against her shoulder, and made a silent promise. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers they might face, she would protect him. And someday, when all this was resolved, perhaps they really would return to their ranch and build the life they had glimpsed so briefly, a life of open spaces, new beginnings, and the freedom to create their own future. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, as much to herself as to him. More than okay. As the SUV sped across the desert, leaving a trail of dust that quickly dissipated in the morning light, Jessica felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope, not just for survival, but for something better. Something meaningful. Something worth fighting for. The secure facility turned out to be a converted mining operation built into a hillside, invisible from the air and accessible only through a carefully concealed entrance. As Admiral Chun's SUV approached what looked like an abandoned equipment shed, a section of the ground silently slid aside, revealing a ramp leading underground. The vehicle descended into a well-lit tunnel that sealed itself behind them. "Welcome to Sanctuary," Admiral Chun said as they emerged into a large cavern that had been transformed into a high-tech operations center. One of several facilities established off the books by intelligence veterans who recognized the need for truly secure locations outside official channels. Jessica helped a wide-eyed Ethan from the vehicle, both of them taking in the unexpected sophistication of the facility. A dozen people worked at various stations, some monitoring security feeds, others analyzing data on multiple screens. The Operation had the precision and professionalism of a government installation, but clearly operated independently. "These are all former intelligence and military personnel?" Jessica asked, noting the disciplined efficiency of the team. "Most of us," Chun confirmed. "After dedicated careers serving our country, we discovered threats coming from within certain power structures, individuals, and groups pursuing agendas contrary to national security, but protected by their positions. We created this network to address threats that official channels can't or won't touch. They were led to a comfortable suite of rooms where food, clean clothes, and basic necessities had been prepared. Get some rest," Admiral Chun advised. "Once you're settled, we'll need to debrief you fully on what you found at Sullivan's bunker." Left alone with Ethan, Jessica helped him change into clean clothes and settle into what would be their temporary home. Despite the extraordinary circumstances, he seemed to be adapting with remarkable resilience. "Is this like a secret superhero base, Mom?" he asked as he explored the room with curious enthusiasm. Jessica smiled despite her exhaustion. "Something like that. These people are working to protect important information." "Like the treasure we found at our ranch?" Ethan asked perceptively. "Exactly like that," Jessica confirmed, once again impressed by her son's intuitive understanding. "That's why we needed to come here, to keep it safe until we can give it to the right people." After Ethan had eaten and settled in with some books and games thoughtfully provided by their hosts, Jessica was escorted to a conference room where Admiral Chun waited with 3 others, a former CIA analyst, a retired Air Force general, and a civilian cybersecurity expert. "Now," Chun said as Jessica took a seat, "tell us exactly what you found." Jessica recounted everything in detail: the hidden key, the bunker's sophisticated security, Sullivan's journal, and the encrypted hard drive containing the nuclear protocols. As she spoke, she noticed the increasingly grave expressions of her listeners. "If Sullivan's claims are accurate," the Air Force general said when she had finished, "this represents one of the most significant breaches of nuclear security protocols in our history. Creating backdoor access to launch authentication would violate every safeguard we've established since the Cold War. Sullivan's record suggests we should take his claims seriously," the CIA analyst added. "His expertise in nuclear command and control systems was unparalleled. If he identified vulnerabilities, they almost certainly existed. The question is whether they still exist," Jessica pointed out, her cybersecurity background helping her focus on the practical implications. "Sullivan disappeared with these corrected protocols 30 years ago. The entire system has been updated multiple times since then." "True," the cybersecurity expert acknowledged, "but core authentication architecture often remains consistent through updates. Backdoors inserted at the foundational level can persist for decades if they're subtly implemented. And if the same people who wanted these vulnerabilities in 1992 remained in positions of influence, the implication hung heavily in the air. Someone had wanted the ability to circumvent normal authorization channels for nuclear weapons, and might still have that capability. We need to decrypt Sullivan's protocols and compare them to current systems," Admiral Chun decided. "Ms. Reeves, given your cybersecurity background, your assistance would be valuable. The rest of us have been away from active duty too long to be familiar with current systems." Jessica hesitated, thinking of Ethan. "My son will be completely safe here," Chun assured her. "We have families of our own. This facility was designed to accommodate children when necessary." After confirming that Ethan would be well cared for, Jessica agreed to help. She was led to a specialized cybersecurity lab where Sullivan's hard drive waited. "The encryption is military grade, circa early 1990s, the tech specialist explained. "Formidable for its time, but potentially vulnerable to modern decryption methods. Sullivan may have also left clues to the decryption key in his journal or elsewhere in the bunker." Jessica spent hours reviewing Sullivan's journal while advanced Decryption algorithms ran against the hard drive security. The journal revealed a brilliant but increasingly isolated man, deeply patriotic yet disillusioned by what he saw as corruption within the systems he had dedicated his life to protecting. He mentioned something called fail-safe harmony repeatedly. Jessica noted, showing the relevant passages to the team. It seems to be both a project name and possibly a passphrase. The cybersecurity expert entered the term into their decryption program. After several tense minutes, the screen flashed. Green. Decryption successful. The contents of the drive revealed themselves. Thousands of pages of technical documentation, authentication protocols, and system architecture diagrams for nuclear command and control systems. Most significantly, Sullivan had included detailed analysis of the vulnerabilities he had discovered and the corrected protocols he had developed to address them. This confirms Sullivan's claims, the Air Force general said gravely after reviewing the key documents. These backdoors would allow someone with the right access codes to bypass the two-person authentication requirement for nuclear launch orders. The question is whether these vulnerabilities were ever addressed after Sullivan disappeared with the corrected protocols. Admiral Chun pointed out. The team worked through the night, comparing Sullivan's documentation with what they could access of current systems. Jessica's recent cybersecurity experience proved invaluable, allowing her to identify where legacy code might still exist within updated frameworks. By morning, they had their answer, and it was disturbing. The core vulnerability Sullivan identified appears to still exist in current systems, Jessica reported, showing the analysis on her screen. It's been obscured by layers of updates and security measures, but the fundamental backdoor remains. Who could access it? Chun asked. Based on Sullivan's documentation, it would require both specialized knowledge of the vulnerability and high-level access codes. We're talking about a very small group of people likely within the Defense Department or intelligence community. The implications were chilling. For 3 decades, a select few individuals had potentially held the ability to circumvent established nuclear safeguards, a power that should never have existed outside the official chain of command. We need to take this to legitimate authorities, the CIA analyst argued. This transcends politics or personal agendas. Carefully, Chun cautioned. The same interests that drove Sullivan into hiding and sent Donovan after Ms. Reeves are still out there. If we move too publicly, the evidence could be destroyed and the vulnerability quietly preserved. A plan began to take shape. They would prepare a comprehensive briefing package documenting both Sullivan's original findings and their current analysis. This would be simultaneously delivered to multiple authorities, the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs, key congressional oversight committees, and trusted journalists who could ensure the information couldn't be buried. Before we proceed, there's something else we need to address, Chun said, turning to Jessica. Donovan and his team know you discovered Sullivan's bunker. They'll assume you have the protocols. Even after we've released this information, you and your son will remain targets. The reality of their situation hit Jessica anew. The momentary safety of Sanctuary was temporary. Eventually, she and Ethan would need to rebuild their lives, and they would do so with powerful enemies aware of their existence. We can offer you new identities, Chun continued. Relocation, financial support, a fresh start somewhere safe. The prospect of disappearing, abandoning the ranch they had just purchased, starting over yet again in an unfamiliar place felt like another defeat. Jessica had spent her life building expertise, credentials, a professional reputation. To lose all that, to raise Ethan under a false identity. There is another option, the Air Force general suggested, seeming to read her hesitation. Once this information becomes public, Donovan and his associates will be exposed. With enough political pressure and media attention, they could be neutralized through legitimate channels, investigation, prosecution, removal from positions of influence. You mean we could potentially return to our normal lives? To the ranch? Jessica asked, hardly daring to hope. Not immediately, Chun cautioned. But eventually, yes. It would require courage. You'd need to be a public witness to what you discovered. There would be hearings, depositions, possibly trials, but you wouldn't need to hide forever. The choice crystallized in Jessica's mind. Running might be safer. In the short term, but what lesson would that teach Ethan? That when confronted with corruption and danger, the right response was to disappear? To hide? The very resilience she had wanted to model for him demanded a different path. I want my son to see that standing for truth matters, Jessica said firmly. We'll take the second option. Whatever it takes to address this properly, and reclaim our lives. Admiral Chun nodded with approval. I was hoping you'd say that. Courage like yours is exactly what our country needs right now. They spent the next 2 days preparing the comprehensive briefing package. Jessica worked alongside the team, her cybersecurity expertise helping translate Sullivan's technical documentation into clear evidence that could be understood by non-specialists. Meanwhile, Ethan was flourishing in the facility where several staff members had taken him under their wing, providing impromptu lessons in everything from basic cryptography to desert ecology. On the third morning, Jessica was surprised to find Ethan engaged in what appeared to be a chess lesson with the retired CIA analyst. Your son has a remarkable mind, the analyst told her as Ethan carefully considered his next move. Strategic thinking, pattern recognition, adaptability, all the qualities we used to look for in potential intelligence officers. I'm going to be a cybersecurity expert like Mom, Ethan declared confidently, moving his bishop to capture the analyst's knight. But I'm also going to raise horses on our ranch. Jessica smiled at his unwavering certainty that they would return to the ranch, a home they had occupied for less than 2 days, but which had already claimed a special place in his heart. Later that day, Admiral Chun called a final meeting to review their strategy. The briefing packages were ready, and trusted couriers were prepared to deliver them simultaneously to ensure no single point of interception could prevent the information from becoming public. Once this is delivered, events will move quickly, Chun warned. We'll need to be ready to present you for testimony within 48 hours. Ms. Reeves, that's the critical window when your first-hand account will have the most impact. Jessica nodded, feeling a strange calm despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. I'm ready. There's something else you should know, Chun added, sliding a folder across the table. We've been investigating Donovan and his associates. They're part of a private intelligence firm called Cerberus Strategic, with deep connections to certain defense contractors and political figures. Jessica opened the folder to find detailed profiles of several individuals, including Donovan. These people have been working together for decades, she noted, seeing the intertwined career paths. Yes, and they've accumulated significant influence. What Sullivan discovered threatened not just their careers, but potentially billions in defense contracts and political capital. They've had 30 years to entrench themselves further. So even with all this evidence, there's no guarantee they'll be held accountable, Jessica realized. There are never guarantees in this line of work, the Air Force general acknowledged. But the vulnerabilities in the nuclear command systems, that will have to be addressed regardless of who takes the fall politically. The technical fixes Sullivan developed can finally be implemented. And that's what matters most, Jessica agreed. Ensuring the systems are secure. That evening, as the couriers departed with their critical information packages, Jessica sat with Ethan on an observation platform built into the hillside above the hidden facility. The desert sunset painted the landscape in brilliant oranges and purples, a natural beauty that stood in stark contrast to the human dangers they faced. Are we going home soon? Ethan asked, leaning against her shoulder. Not just yet, Jessica answered honestly. First, I need to help some important people understand what we found at the ranch. It might take a little time, and it might be difficult, but it's necessary. Ethan considered this with the directness only children can manage. Like when you made me go to the dentist even though I was scared, because it was necessary? Jessica laughed softly. Something like that, though a bit more complicated. Is it because of what was in the secret bunker, the treasure? Yes, what we found wasn't exactly treasure, it was information. Very important information that can help keep people safe. Ethan nodded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. When we go back to the ranch, can we fix it up? Make it really nice? That's the plan, Jessica assured him, hoping she could keep that promise. We'll repair the roof, fix the plumbing, maybe even look into solar power so we're not dependent on the electrical grid. And horses, Ethan added firmly. A ranch needs horses. Eventually, Jessica smiled. One step at a time. As darkness fell, bringing out the vast canopy of stars overhead, Jessica reflected on the extraordinary turn their lives had taken. Just days ago, she had been facing eviction, her professional identity in tatters, her future uncertain. Now she stood at the center of a 3-decade-old conspiracy involving nuclear command systems, preparing to testify before the highest levels of government. The journey ahead would be challenging. There would be those who would try to discredit her, to minimize Sullivan's discoveries, to protect the status quo. But for the first time in months, Jessica felt the full force of her capabilities reawakening. She had spent years developing expertise in cybersecurity precisely to protect critical systems from exploitation. Now she had the opportunity to apply that expertise to perhaps the most important security vulnerability possible. Admiral Chun joined them on the observation platform, her normally stern expression softened by the evening light. Beautiful, isn't it? She remarked, gazing at the star-filled sky. Worth protecting. That's what I keep thinking, Jessica agreed. When I was working in corporate cybersecurity, I sometimes lost sight of the bigger picture, why security matters in the first place. It's not about systems or protocols or even institutions. It's about people, lives, futures. Like his. Chun nodded toward Ethan, who had dozed off against Jessica's side. Exactly. When I bought that ranch, I was just trying to keep a roof over our heads. I never imagined that you'd end up helping secure the nation's nuclear command systems. Chun finished with a rare smile. Life rarely follows the paths we expect. The question is how we respond when it veers into unexpected territory. By staying true to what matters, Jessica said, the words coming with a certainty she hadn't felt in months. By remembering why we're doing what we're doing. Chun nodded approvingly. You know, when Sullivan designed this network of trusted contacts, what eventually became our organization, he included profiles of the types of people who might someday continue his work. One category was the reluctant guardian, someone who stumbles into a critical role, not through ambition, but through circumstance and rises to the challenge out of necessity. Jessica recognized herself in that description. She hadn't sought this responsibility, but now that it had found her, she couldn't turn away from it. The briefing packages should reach their destinations by morning, Chun continued. After that, we have arrangements to transport you and Ethan to Washington. Under protection. Are you prepared for what comes next? Jessica looked down at her sleeping son, then back at the stars overhead. The ranch that had seemed like such a desperate last resort had led them here to this moment. This responsibility, this chance to make a difference that extended far beyond their personal struggles. Yes, she answered with quiet confidence. We're ready. The next morning brought confirmation that all briefing packages had been successfully delivered. The response was swift and decisive. An emergency closed session of the Senate Intelligence Committee was convened, and the Secretary of Defense ordered an immediate security review of the nuclear command and control systems. As Jessica and Ethan prepared to depart for Washington, Admiral Chun presented her with a secure communications device. No matter what happens in the coming days, you won't be alone, Chun assured her. Our network will remain available to you, both for security and support. What you're doing takes extraordinary courage. Jessica accepted the device, feeling the weight of responsibility it represented. I'm just trying to do what's right. What anyone would do in my position. Not anyone, Chun corrected her. Most people would have taken the money Donovan would undoubtedly have offered for the protocols, or chosen the safety of new identities and disappearance. The path you've chosen to stand publicly for the truth, that's exceptional. As they boarded the unmarked helicopter that would begin their journey to Washington, Jessica took one last look at the desert landscape surrounding the hidden facility. Somewhere out there was the ranch she had purchased with her last $400, a desperate gamble that had changed everything. Whatever happened next, she knew they would never be the same. The foreclosed ranch had given them more than shelter, it had given them purpose. The hidden bunker beneath it had contained not just missing nuclear protocols, but a chance for Jessica to reclaim her expertise, her confidence, and her sense of mission. Ethan buckled himself into his seat with practiced ease, already adapting to their extraordinary circumstances with the resilience of childhood. "Mom," he said as the helicopter's engines whirred to life, "when all this is over and we go back to our ranch, I think we should paint it blue. A bright blue, so everyone can see it's a new beginning." Jessica smiled, touched by his unwavering optimism. "Blue it is then, a new beginning." As the helicopter lifted off, carrying them toward whatever challenges awaited in Washington, Jessica felt a certainty that had been missing from her life for too long. They had lost so much financial security, stability, the comfortable predictability of their former life. But they had gained something perhaps more valuable, the knowledge that they could face the unknown together, that their actions mattered, that courage and truth still had power in the world. The ranch would be waiting for them when this was over, a symbol of the fresh start they had sought and the unexpected purpose they had found. It had cost her last $400, but what it had given them was truly priceless. Washington, D.C. appeared through the helicopter window as they approached, its iconic monuments glowing in the late afternoon sun. For Jessica, who had visited only twice before for cybersecurity conferences, the city represented both the highest ideals of American democracy and the complex, sometimes troubling reality of power and politics. Now she was arriving not as a tourist or professional attendee, but as someone carrying information that could potentially shake the highest levels of government. Their landing wasn't at any commercial or military airport, but on a private helipad at a secure facility in Virginia. A small delegation waited for them, 2 uniformed military officers and a civilian woman in a crisp suit who introduced herself as Special Counsel Diane Lawson from the Department of Justice. "Ms. Reeves," Lawson greeted her with a firm handshake. "Thank you for coming. I understand the circumstances are extraordinary. We've arranged secure accommodations for you and your son while preparations are made for your testimony." Jessica kept a protective arm around Ethan's shoulders as they were escorted to an armored SUV. "What's the status of the information packages?" she asked, wanting to confirm that Sullivan's protocols were being taken seriously. "The Secretary of Defense has personally convened a technical working group to analyze the protocols," one of the military officers informed her. "Preliminary assessments confirm Colonel Sullivan's findings. The vulnerabilities appear to exist in current systems." This confirmation both vindicated their efforts and underscored the gravity of the situation. For 3 decades, a small group had maintained secret access to bypass critical safeguards in the nuclear command structure, an unthinkable breach of security and public trust. They were driven to a comfortable but clearly secure government guesthouse in a quiet diplomatic area of the city. While outwardly it resembled a high-end hotel, Jessica noted the subtle security measures, reinforced windows, surveillance systems, and the unobtrusive but ever-present security personnel. These will be your quarters until the hearings conclude." Lawson explained as they were shown to a 2-bedroom suite. "For security reasons, we ask that you remain on the premises unless accompanied by authorized personnel. Everything you need can be brought to you." After ensuring they were settled, Lawson outlined the coming days. "Tomorrow morning, you'll meet with the Joint Intelligence Committee staff for preliminary debriefing. The day after, formal testimony begins closed session initially, though portions may eventually become public record." When they were finally alone, Ethan explored the suite with his usual curiosity, while Jessica unpacked their meager belongings. The contrast between their previous circumstances, facing eviction from a weekly rate motel, and their current high security accommodations wasn't lost on her. "Is this where the president stays when he visits people?" Ethan asked, bouncing experimentally on the plush bed in his room. Jessica smiled. "Not exactly, but it's definitely nicer than our motel was." "Or the ranch," Ethan added, though without criticism. "But the ranch will be better once we fix it up." His unwavering confidence that they would return to the ranch touched Jessica deeply. Children lived in the present, but also maintained absolute faith in future promises, combination that adults often lost along the way. That evening, they were visited by a distinguished older man who introduced himself as Director James Harrington of the National Security Agency. His presence indicated the seriousness with which Sullivan's protocols were being treated. "Ms. Reeves," he said after Ethan had been settled in the adjacent room with dinner and a movie, "I wanted to personally thank you for bringing this matter forward. The analysis of Colonel Sullivan's materials has confirmed our worst fears. These vulnerabilities represent a fundamental breach of our most critical security systems. Has there been any indication they've ever been utilized?" Jessica asked, the question that had been haunting her since decrypting Sullivan's files. Director Harrington's expression darkened. "We're conducting a comprehensive audit of all nuclear command activities for the past 30 years. It's painstaking work, but preliminary findings suggest at least 3 incidents where unauthorized access to the system occurred, though thankfully, none resulted in actual launch scenarios. The implications were chilling. Someone had not only created these backdoors, but had actually used them to gain unauthorized access to nuclear command systems." "What about Donovan and Cerberus Strategic?" Jessica pressed. "We've identified 8 individuals who appear to be part of this cabal, including Donovan," Harrington confirmed. 4 are current government officials, 3 are with defense contractors, and 1 is a retired general now working as a private consultant. Surveillance has been established on all of them." "Are they aware of that?" Jessica asked. "They know something is happening," Harrington acknowledged. "The emergency security review couldn't be completely concealed. But they don't yet know that we have Sullivan's complete protocols, or that you're here in Washington. That advantage won't last long once the hearings begin." Before leaving, Director Harrington handed Jessica a secure tablet. "This contains the full briefing materials for tomorrow's meeting. I suggest you review them thoroughly. Your cybersecurity background gives you unique credibility in explaining these technical vulnerabilities to non-specialists." After he departed, Jessica spent hours studying the materials, which included both Sullivan's original documentation and the government's preliminary analysis confirming his findings. The technical details were complex even for someone with her background, but the implications were clear. The very foundation of nuclear security had been compromised for decades. The next morning brought a series of intense preparatory meetings with Intelligence Committee staff. Jessica walked them through Sullivan's discoveries, translating the technical aspects into terms the legislators could understand during the upcoming hearings. Throughout, she was impressed by the professionalism and seriousness with which her information was being treated. During a brief break, she called Admiral Chun using the secure device she had been given. "How are things proceeding?" Chun asked. "Without preamble, better than I expected," Jessica admitted. They're taking Sullivan's protocols seriously. There's already a technical team implementing his security fixes. And Cerberus? Under surveillance but not yet detained. I gather they're waiting to build a comprehensive case. Chun's voice took on a note of caution. Be careful, Jessica. Cornered adversaries are the most dangerous. These people have spent decades protecting their access to these systems. They won't surrender that power easily. The warning proved prescient. That evening, as Jessica and Ethan were finishing dinner in their suite, Special Counsel Lawson arrived with disturbing news. We've had a security breach, she informed Jessica tersely. Someone within the Intelligence Committee staff leaked information about your presence in Washington and the nature of your testimony. Donovan and his associates have gone to ground disappeared before they could be brought in for questioning. Jessica felt a chill of apprehension. What does this mean for tomorrow's hearing? It proceeds as planned, but with enhanced security. Lawson assured her. We're moving you and Ethan to a different location tonight as a precaution. Within the hour, they were relocated to a military installation outside the city, a stark contrast to their previous comfortable accommodations, but undeniably secure. Ethan, remarkably adaptable, treated the whole experience as an adventure, especially when their military escorts gave him a special patch designating him as an honorary security officer. See, Mom, now I'm helping protect you, he said proudly, the oversized patch dominating his small shoulder. Jessica hugged him tightly, marveling at his resilience. You always have, buddy. More than you know. That night, as Ethan slept in the adjacent room of their new quarters, Jessica prepared herself mentally for the next day's testimony. She would be speaking not just to members of Congress, but to history itself, revealing a 3-decade conspiracy that had undermined one of the nation's most critical security systems. The weight of responsibility was immense, but so was the clarity of purpose she now felt. For months after losing her job, she had struggled with a loss of professional identity and direction. Now, ironically, her desperate purchase of a foreclosed ranch had led her to the most important application of her expertise she could imagine. Morning came too quickly. Jessica dressed carefully in the professional attire that had been provided for her, conservative suit that projected competence and credibility. After ensuring Ethan was settled with a child care specialist who had security clearance, she was escorted to the Capitol under heavy protection. The hearing room was imposing wood-paneled walls, an elevated committee dais, and the weight of national security decisions that had been made within these walls over decades. Jessica was shown to a witness table with a microphone and water pitcher, facing the semicircle of senators and representatives who comprised the Joint Intelligence Committee. The committee chairman, Senator Marshall, began the proceedings with unusual solemnity. This closed session has been convened to address what appears to be one of the most significant security breaches in our nation's history. Our witness today, Jessica Reeves, has provided documentation suggesting that unauthorized access points were deliberately built into our nuclear command and control systems, and that these vulnerabilities have persisted for nearly 30 years. Jessica was sworn in, the formal oath underscoring the gravity of her testimony. Then, for nearly 2 hours, she methodically presented what she had discovered at Sullivan's bunker, the hidden protocols, his detailed documentation of the vulnerabilities, and the evidence that a small group had maintained these backdoors through multiple system upgrades. Her cybersecurity background proved invaluable as she explained complex technical concepts in terms the committee members could understand. Several times, technical experts from the Defense Department were called to corroborate specific details, each confirmation adding weight to her testimony. Ms. Reeves, Senator Marshall asked after her initial presentation concluded, in your professional assessment, what would have been possible if someone utilized these backdoors? Jessica chose her words carefully. These vulnerabilities would have allowed authorized users to bypass the two-person authentication requirement for nuclear launch commands. In essence, it created the possibility for a single individual with the right access codes to initiate launch sequences without the normal verification protocols. A murmur ran through the committee members. The two-person rule was a fundamental safeguard in nuclear command systems, ensuring that no single individual, not even the president, could initiate a nuclear launch unilaterally. And you believe these backdoors were deliberately created, not accidental vulnerabilities? Another committee member pressed. Colonel Sullivan's documentation is quite clear on this point, Jessica confirmed. The code structures identified show intentional design, not programming errors. Someone specifically engineered these access points and then concealed them within the larger system architecture. The questioning continued for hours, delving into technical details, the timeline of events, and Jessica's own involvement. Throughout, she maintained her composure, even when certain committee members seemed skeptical of her account or protective of long-standing defense institutions. During a brief recess, Special Counsel Lawson approached Jessica with an update. "You're doing exceptionally well," she said quietly. "The technical teams have confirmed everything in Sullivan's protocols. They're implementing his security fixes as we speak." "What about Donovan and his associates?" Jessica asked. Lawson's expression tightened. "Still missing, but we've frozen their assets and issued federal warrants. They won't get far." When the hearing resumed, the focus shifted to the current threat. "Ms. Reeves," the committee chair asked, "in your view, what remains to be done to secure these systems properly?" Jessica straightened in her chair, moving from witness to expert, a transition that felt both natural and empowering. "Three things are critical. First, Sullivan's corrected protocols must be fully implemented across all nuclear command systems. Second, a comprehensive security audit needs to identify any other potential vulnerabilities these individuals might have created. And third," she paused, knowing her next point might be controversial, "we need greater transparency in how these systems are designed and monitored." The very secrecy that was meant to protect these systems ultimately allowed this vulnerability to persist for decades. The hearing concluded late in the afternoon, with the committee voting unanimously to establish a special oversight task force to address the vulnerabilities and investigate those responsible. As Jessica gathered her materials, several committee members approached to thank her personally for her courage in coming forward. "You've performed an extraordinary service to your country today," Senator Marshall told her. "History may never know exactly what catastrophes were averted by your actions, but those of us in this room certainly do." As Jessica was escorted from the Capitol, she felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that the truth was finally exposed, concern for what might still lie ahead, and a surprising sense of professional fulfillment. For the first time in months, she had applied her expertise to a problem that truly mattered, and she had done so effectively. The next 3 days brought a whirlwind of activity. Jessica provided additional testimony to military investigators and technical teams implementing Sullivan's security fixes. Ethan remained under protection at the military installation, where he had become something of a mascot to the security personnel, who taught him card games and basic self-defense moves during their off-duty hours. On the 4th day, Special Counsel Lawson arrived with significant news. "We've apprehended Donovan and 4 others," she announced. "They were attempting to leave the country on falsified diplomatic credentials." "What about the others?" Jessica asked. 2 turned themselves in and are cooperating in exchange for consideration in sentencing. 1 remains at large, but we've identified his location and expect to have him in custody within hours." The swift resolution of the immediate threat brought a measure of relief, but Jessica knew the larger implications would take years to fully address. The vulnerability in the nuclear command systems had been exposed and was being corrected, but the fact that it had existed at all and had been deliberately created and maintained by trusted officials would require a fundamental reevaluation of how critical security systems were designed and overseen. Later that evening, Director Harrington visited their quarters with an unexpected proposal. "Ms. Reeves, your expertise has proven invaluable throughout this crisis. The President has authorized me to offer you a position heading a new cybersecurity integrity division within the NSA, focused specifically on ensuring our most critical systems remain free from unauthorized modifications." The offer was stunning, a direct appointment to a senior government position with significant responsibility, and the chance to ensure that vulnerabilities like those Sullivan had discovered could never again remain hidden for decades. "I'm honored," Jessica said sincerely, "but I need to consider what's best for my son. We've been through a lot of upheaval recently." "Of course," Harrington nodded. "The position would be based here in Washington, with excellent schools nearby and housing provided. Your son would have stability and security, and you would be doing work of vital national importance." Jessica promised to consider the offer carefully, but that night, as she watched Ethan sleeping peacefully, her thoughts returned repeatedly to the ranch they had so briefly called home. The city would offer advantages, professional opportunities, educational resources, financial security, but something about the ranch had spoken to both of them in a way that transcended practical considerations. The next morning, Jessica received an unexpected call on her secure line. It was Admiral Chun. "I understand you've been offered a position with the NSA," Chun said without preamble. "News travels fast," Jessica remarked. "Yes, Director Harrington approached me yesterday." "It's a good offer," Chun acknowledged. "Important work that matches your expertise. But before you decide, I wanted you to know there's another option." Chun explained that her network of former intelligence professionals had been impressed by Jessica's handling of the Sullivan protocols. They were establishing a new cybersecurity consulting firm focused on identifying vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure systems, private sector work, but with significant public impact. "We'd like you to head our technical division," Chun offered. "The position would allow you to work primarily remotely, with occasional travel. You could live wherever you choose, including that ranch you and your son seem so attached to." The alternative was compelling, meaningful work that utilized her skills, but with the freedom to create the life she wanted for Ethan, away from Washington politics and bureaucracy. "I'll need to think about both offers," Jessica said honestly. "Of course," Chun replied. "But whatever you decide, know that what you've done these past weeks has already changed the course of history, even if most people will never know the details." That afternoon, Jessica requested a meeting with Director Harrington and Special Counsel Lawson to discuss her future plans and to ask one critical question: "What's happening with the Harmon Ranch?" "It's still yours," Lawson confirmed. "Though, given what was found there was some discussion of government acquisition. However, the bunker itself has been thoroughly documented and its contents secured. The property itself poses no ongoing security concern. The ranch was my fresh start," Jessica explained. "Bought with my last dollars when we were facing eviction. It may sound strange given everything that's happened, but both Ethan and I feel connected to that place." Director Harrington studied her thoughtfully. "You're considering declining our offer to return there?" "I'm considering all my options," Jessica clarified, "including a private sector position that would allow remote work." Rather than appearing disappointed, Harrington seemed to understand. "The kind of courage you've demonstrated these past weeks is rare, Ms. Reeves. So is the expertise you bring to cybersecurity challenges. The country needs people like you, but that service can take many forms." By the following week, all immediate threats had been neutralized. Donovan and his associates were in custody. Sullivan's security fixes had been fully implemented across all nuclear command systems, and a comprehensive review was underway to identify any other potential vulnerabilities. Jessica and Ethan were cleared to return to Arizona, with appropriate security measures in place until the legal proceedings against the Cerberus group concluded. Before leaving Washington, Jessica made her decision. She would accept Admiral Chun's offer, allowing her to do meaningful cybersecurity work while rebuilding the ranch with Ethan. Their return to the Harmon ranch was both surreal and deeply satisfying. The property had been thoroughly searched and secured by government teams, but otherwise left intact. The hidden bunker remained, though its most sensitive contents had been removed. After discussion with Admiral Chun and Director Harrington, it was agreed that the facility could be repurposed as a secure home office for Jessica's new position, a fitting use for Colonel Sullivan's legacy. The day after their return, as Jessica and Ethan stood surveying the work ahead of them, a convoy of vehicles appeared on the access road. To her surprise, Frank Delgado from the hardware store emerged from the lead truck, followed by several other locals. "Heard you were back," Frank said simply. "Figured you might need some help getting this place livable." Behind him, a dozen community members unloaded tools, building materials, and even furniture. Among them was Marianne Cooper from the library, who approached with a warm smile. "Word gets around in small towns," she explained. "Not the classified details, of course, but enough for people to understand you did something important for the country. This is our way of saying thank you." Over the next several weeks, the community rallied around them in ways Jessica could never have anticipated. Contractors donated time to repair the roof and upgrade the plumbing. Local ranchers helped restore fencing and even brought 2 gentle horses for Ethan to learn riding, fulfilling his dream of a real ranch. The dilapidated workshop was converted into a state-of-the-art home office connected to a secure satellite network for Jessica's new consulting work. 6 months after their desperate purchase of the foreclosed property, the transformation was remarkable. The ranch house gleamed with fresh blue paint, Ethan's chosen color for their new beginning. Solar panels provided reliable, independent electricity. The land had been cleared and partially replanted with native vegetation. Most importantly, it had become truly their home, a place of safety, purpose, and new possibilities. On a warm evening as the sun set over the desert mountains, Jessica sat on the rebuilt porch watching Ethan lead one of his horses through basic training exercises in the corral they had constructed together. The contrast with their circumstances just months earlier could hardly have been more dramatic. Admiral Chun, visiting to discuss their first major consulting project, joined her on the porch with a rare smile. "Quite a change from when you first bought this place." Jessica nodded, taking in the transformed property. "When I spent my last $400 on this ranch, I was just trying to keep us from homelessness. I never imagined where it would lead." "Life rarely follows a straight path," Chun observed. "Sometimes our most desperate decisions lead to our greatest opportunities." Jessica thought about the journey that had brought them here, from the brink of eviction to uncovering a 3-decade conspiracy, from unemployment to heading a specialized cybersecurity consultancy, from desperation to purpose. The foreclosed ranch that no one had wanted had become not just their home, but the catalyst for profound change, both in their personal lives and in national security. "You know," Jessica said, watching Ethan's confident interaction with his horse, "when we first arrived here, he told me the ranch needed us, that it had been waiting for someone to love it again. Children see things sometimes that adults miss." Chun nodded thoughtfully. "Sullivan chose this place deliberately isolated, overlooked, perfect for his purposes. Perhaps he also chose its future owner in a way, leaving those breadcrumbs for someone with the right combination of skills and character to find." Whether by chance or design, the ranch had connected Jessica to her greatest professional challenge and her most meaningful work. The hidden bunker that had contained missing Pentagon nuclear protocols had also, in a way, contained their future, a purpose larger than themselves, and a home where they could build a new life on their own terms. As darkness fell and the stars emerged in the vast desert sky, Jessica felt a deep sense of contentment. The ranch that had cost her last $400 had given them everything they truly needed: security, purpose, community, and the chance to make a difference in the world while creating the life they wanted. "Mom," Ethan called excitedly from the corral. "Watch what Stellar can do now." Jessica turned her attention to her son, marveling at his growth over these challenging months. He had faced uncertainty, danger, and dramatic change with remarkable resilience, finding joy and opportunity at every turn. In that, he had been her greatest teacher. The story of the foreclosed ranch and its hidden secrets would someday make an extraordinary legacy for him, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, when resources are scarce and the future uncertain, the choices we make can open doors to possibilities we never imagined. Sometimes, our most desperate decisions become our most transformative opportunities if we have the courage to walk through the doors they open. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.